Today, I want to talk about how sobriety is not the magic answer to solving your problems. What it is a great way to start. It gives you the ability to start addressing what's the underlying problem behind why you use or can't stop or have a problem using. In my case, it was alcohol, whatever it may be for you. So what it does do is it allows you to start dealing with your emotions, start challenging your thought patterns, and start to implement some consistency and discipline in your life. And the largest issue with any addict is, dealing with emotions. Like, the only way I knew how to deal with any type of problem in my life was to drink. So until it became the largest problem and the only solution to my problem was to drink. So, when I first stopped drinking, or in previous attempts, when I was attempting sobriety, the smallest thing would set me off. I kid you not when I say missing the bus was all of a sudden an excuse to just screw it. I'm drinking. I'm over it. I'm trying. Nothing's going my way. May as well go back to what I know works. And over time, you see the insanity of that thinking, right? That these behaviors change nothing, don't help my situation. If anything, they just make them worse and perpetuate this same cycle. And the largest part of that was I realized that alcohol was no longer the problem. This whole time as I'm drinking, I think alcohol is the issue, but I realized that the real issue is the way it makes me think, the way it makes me behave. Alcohol makes me into a different person, and even when I stop it, I still have some of those behaviors, right? Because alcohol is an amplifier. So some of those behaviors and those thought patterns I still have when I'm sober, and those are the issues that lead me to drinking, right? And a lot of it just has to do with having expectations, wanting to fix, manage, and control situations, people, and pretty much anything in my life. So the solution to that was just letting go. Accepting that I'm not as powerful as I think I am. I don't have control of outcomes. Even if I do everything right, something can go wrong and it won't go my way. And that's not to say be blameless and don't take accountability in that. It's that essentially you have to be okay with just doing what you can, is doing your best, and whatever happens, letting the chips fall where they may. And the beautiful thing about that is you start to put more energy and focus into actually doing your best, and more things go your way because you're actually, more dedicated to doing the right thing instead of trying to fix the outcome. You're focused on the right thing, essentially. You're putting your effort, spending it in the right direction, and it typically leads to a better result anyway. And then you do that enough times, right? You start to build some trust with yourself, right? You start to actually make some promises with yourself. You keep them, you build some trust, you start to increase, your self-image. And that leads to, having, a higher self-respect, and so on and so forth. And that relationship that you begin to develop with yourself, that you've been essentially destroying and harming this entire time you've been out here, using, is essentially the cornerstone to having a positive outlook on life and a positive life altogether. And a lot of the time, I realized that my biggest problem with my relationship to myself is that I'm too hard on myself. I make the barrier to success so high that it's inevitable for me to tarnish my own relationship with myself. And a lot of that is, old addict thinking logic of more is always better, more is always better. More goals, more money, more success, more achievements, bigger muscles, more weight on the bar, whatever the case may be. And as time keeps passing by, I realize that thinking isn't really gonna go anywhere. It sounds like all doom and gloom, but that personality trait, that thought pattern at its core, doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. If anything, it seems like it's just kind of part of who I am, and the best way to combat it is to be aware of it and channel it into things that are productive, things that are beneficial towards my life in whichever aspect best suits me at that time. But to believe that I can alter it or control it or manage it is back to that backwards thinking of trying to fix, manage, and control things. And instead of trying to constantly battle my nature, my instinct, sometimes it's kind of better to figure out the best way to use it to your advantage. It seems like a very convoluted way but to go about self-improving, but genuinely it is the path of least resistance. This is now my fourth formal attempt, fifth general attempt at sobriety, and I see a lot of people that go in and out of treatment and have a long fought battle, like 12 rounds, trying to get this thing right. And frankly, I'm no different than them. The only thing that I can generally say with confidence is that I am doing my best. And it seems to be that I accepted that I had a problem much sooner than most people. I'm 25. I'd say the median age of people that I encounter in these rooms is, easily 35, probably closer to 40. And it's interesting because you can learn a lot just from their life experiences. However, at the same time, I can be of service to them in telling them how I got things right. Because a lot of the time I see people who are, mid-30s who are struggling to get 90 days. And I've, had 90 days, came and went multiple times. So anyway, it's nice to be useful and needed and of value somewhere. And the number one thing that I typically end up having to tell people is the fastest way to getting yourself sober is getting to know who you are. And people talk about having like an identity crisis and not knowing who they are, so they start to invent themselves. And in my experience, that doesn't work. There, especially if you're older, which most people who are on this journey are going to be full-grown adults. So you have to have a baseline understanding of, your natural instincts, what your preferences are, and what gets you up out of bed in the morning is one that really I needed to dial in, because without alcohol, there was no reason for me to wake up. I would just stay in bed like a sloth and do nothing. Which just perpetuated this cycle of misery. And what gets me up gets me out of bed in the morning is to be needed. Being needed somewhere, right, gets me out of bed. Knowing that I am useful to some company, something, that I'm making an impact somewhere, gets me going to doing whatever needs to be done. And that over time, doing that consistently, getting up out of bed when you don't want to, or finding the things that will get you the motivation to do what you don't want to do, you'll gain discipline, because over time it will take less and less and less of that motivation to be able to just do it, right? until it becomes second nature, until it becomes muscle memory and you're on autopilot and you're just doing what you have to do, and you can add more to your plate. And that work can only be done if an individual takes the step of getting the clarity from sobriety. Because I tried to do it while I was drinking, and I'd make some development, but it was never consistent. That was the biggest key factor. The only thing that I had consistent in my life was using and drinking. So yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal, is to build that muscle of consistency. That's the main incentive for getting sober. And let me tell you, it's a pretty good one. I highly recommend. That's what I thought I'd share. I hope you guys got something out of it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.